Hello, my name's Jade and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in January. What was I doing with my hands then? I read 9 books in January. 2 of them were non-fiction. 1 of them was a graphic novel. 1 of them was like a novella or a short story or something along those lines. And the rest of them were novels. Pretty sure as well that all of them were like really great reads. Like I at least really enjoyed all of them, I think. Oh, maybe except for 1. But it was a really good reading month for me. I had a lot of fun this month. The first book I read was Venus and Aphrodite, History of a Goddess by Bethany Hughes. So this is a history of Venus and Aphrodite, mostly on like how she came to be, how the goddess kind of was formed and the story behind her was formed, and like her origins, because this is a goddess that began as other goddesses and kind of slowly merged to be the way that we think of her now. And it does touch on like modern day, the way we've kind of modernized her, I guess. And it's kind of broken down into like different subjects. We've got like her birth, fornicating and fighting, the party queen, a working goddess and working girls, the things of sex, and then all the way down to Venus at the box office, Venus in the Middle Ages, a very modern goddess. And it also includes artworks and like pictures of statues of her. It's a very short book and it supposedly came from like 5+ years of research or something like that, so I was expecting it to be a little bigger, a little more comprehensive. There were some times where there were certain topics that were skimmed over a little quicker than I wanted to, and I thought we could pause and go into a bit more detail here. Like all the stuff with her in the beginning and the different cultures I really enjoyed. There was a section where we talked about gay love and stuff, which I thought would be really important, and it was touched on, but we didn't stay there nearly as long as I personally wanted to stay there. So it's a little bit frustrating just because there's more to learn here, I feel like, and I wanted to learn it and I was really enjoying it, so I wanted it to be in this book. But you can probably go out and read more if you want more. This is a good introduction to her, and I think this stuff about her very early beginnings is really valuable, and that's the biggest thing I took away from this. Along with the goddess of Lemka? Lemba, Lady of Lemba, which it turns out I have a statue of the Lady of Lemba and I didn't even realize what it was. So now I know. If you didn't know, it looks like this, and I think they were a woman. I think it's a woman with a penis head. I think that's what they were. And I had this statue of this woman with a penis head and I didn't even know. So at least now I know. I did the audiobook for this. It's narrated by Bethany Hughes herself. It was really easy to listen to. It was really interesting. I had a really nice time reading it. Yeah, it was interesting. It was enjoyable. Maybe not the most comprehensive. That's all I have to say on it, I think. I'd give it like a 7 out of 10. Maybe a 6.5. A goal for this year is I'm trying to use the range of the scale better, because I always end up saying like predominantly between 6 out of 10 and 9 out of 10 is where I will predominantly categorize things. Majoritively 7s and 8s, and I'm trying to break out of that habit and use a fuller range. It's hard because I try not to be a very negative person, and I know the amount of work that goes into writing. It's rare that I find something that I really like dislike. So about a 7-ish out of 10. I did enjoy it, and it reminds me a little bit of Pandora's Jar, which I read last year and absolutely loved, and that is about the women of ancient Greece, characters of ancient Greek myth, and learning more about the women and the way they're misunderstood. And that one's narrated by Natalie Haynes as well, and I really enjoyed both of them, and now I just want to find more audiobooks like this. So if you know any, please let me know. Next up, I read Skulduggery Pleasant Resurrection, the first book in the second phase of the Skulduggery Pleasant series. If you're unaware of what Skulduggery Pleasant is a series. It starts with this one. This is the old cover now. It's about a 12-year-old girl who meets a skeleton detective and worms her way into his heart and being his partner. And there's magic and shenanigans, and it ends up having a really big arc. There's 9 books in the first series, not including like spin-off stories or anything like that, because there are a bunch of those as well. And then Skulduggery Pleasant Resurrection is the first book in the second series, of which there will be 6 books. The last one comes out this year, actually. I reread all of Skulduggery Pleasant that I had read before and got up to date. I didn't finish the series when I read them as a kid. So I read the last 2 books and I'm finally getting to read the new books. There was a time when I didn't even think I'd ever actually read the new books, so I thought it'd gotten too far away from me. I'm so glad that I'm here and that I get to read the new ones. I was nervous going into this one because a lot of time has passed between the end of this series and the beginning of this one, and so I just didn't know how different they would be. And it did definitely have a different tone. It was a lot more serious because we're dealing with the consequences and the fallout of what happened in the first series, and it's really affected specifically our main character. So it was really interesting to see, but because of that, the tone was definitely more serious. It was definitely less jovial, and because of that, I don't think it was as funny, and that's a really big thing with this series. They're really funny books. The characters are all really snarky and just really great to hang around with. So it's not necessarily a problem that this one's serious. I mean, it makes sense for it to be serious. It was just less funny because of that. Other than that though, I enjoyed it. It's hard because compared to the scale that we built up to in the first series, this one doesn't really compare because we're not dealing with these really big, exciting things that we were just dealing with. Like, this is a much calmer, like much smaller scale. I mean, not necessarily. We're introduced to what will be the overarching problem that we're going to build towards in this book, which didn't happen with the first series. It took a couple books to get there because the series was so long. There was a lot of backstory that we had to like get through first. Well, not backstory, but you know, stuff had to happen before we could get to that stage. And we bounced between a few different characters. We got some new characters in this one that are really interesting, and I can only imagine that their role is going to get bigger and bigger as the series goes on. I'm very excited to watch this play out. I had fun. I don't know where I'd put it on my scale of Skulduggery books. I need to think about it longer, and to me it just feels very different from the original series, so I need to like harmonize them in my mind a little bit. I'd probably give it like a 7-ish out of 10 as well, maybe a 7.5. It's hard because I'm pretty sure I gave the whole of the Skulduggery Pleasant series 8s out of 10, and I don't necessarily think it's worse than them. I don't know. Like I said, I don't use the range of the scale very well. Next up was the graphic novel I read this month, and that was the 10th volume of Giant Days. I read volumes 1 through 9 last year. I'm really enjoying this series. If you don't know what it's about 3 young women going to university and their friendship, and it follows them throughout years 1, 2, and 3. This one is the beginning of their 3rd year. Because of that, the tone was a little more serious. The problems that they have, they're constantly going through all these problems, and a lot of the time they're very comical and silly and fun. But they're a little bit more like real life feeling, like these are like real things that people go through. But it was still funny and cute and easy to read. They're really great to read if you're like stressed. That's why I read it. I got really overwhelmed one night and couldn't sleep, and so I read like half of it. This volume in particular is really short, and then the next one's really long. I have 11 ready to go. Probably like an 8 out of 10. I think that's more or less what I've given the majority of them. Maybe again like a 7.5 just because it was a little bit more serious in tone. But there's not a lot to say about this one. I talk about them, I feel like, in every wrap up because I'm constantly reading them. And then next we have Skulduggery Pleasant Midnight, which is the 2nd book in the new Skulduggery Pleasant series. I'm trying to get up to date in and around for when the last book comes out. The last book comes out April 12th, I think. It's like the 2nd week of April or something. And so I've got another 3, 4 if you count the grimoire to go. I don't want to go too much into the synopsis, partially because it's the 2nd book in a series, so it's hard to say things without spoiling things, but also this synopsis is really bad. It literally only talks about something that is a big thing that happens in this book, and it's like the only thing I can really remember happening off the top of my head at the minute. It doesn't happen until halfway through. So the first half of the book I knew something was coming and I was just waiting for it. I was waiting for this like plot to kick in, and it doesn't happen until literally halfway through the book. So don't read the synopsis, it's fine. The first half is enjoyable, it's important stuff still, we're building stuff for the future. This one had a much more jovial tone. It felt a little more reminiscent of the older books, their fun time shenanigans. And like I said, there's like multiple different characters and the different plot lines running I was really invested in. I had a bit of a problem with this one in that the climax and the end felt like it lasted forever. We just kept going, and it didn't seem to be of high consequence. Like, it didn't seem to be necessary for it to go on for so long. And I think because we were in the same place for so long and there was no time jumps, we were just back to back to back to back for hundreds at least of pages, at least 100 pages it must have been, and we kept just like trying to fix the problem and then not being able, and it got very repetitive feeling. We just kept trying and kept failing, so we tried again and then we failed again, and then we tried again and then we failed again. It was a bit much. It was a bit much. I was losing my mind a little bit at that point. Other than that, there's not much to fault. It's rare that I have problems with the Skulduggery Pleasant books because I just love them. It's rare that I'll have something that like actually annoys me that much, but this did kind of annoy me. This one was really interesting as well, like I said, about how in the first book we already know what's going to be the overarching thing. Well, we don't know exactly how it's all going to play out, but I'm pretty sure we're building towards things, because in this world you can see visions. And that was really important with what was building in the original series, and there's a vision in the first book, and so I can only assume that's what we're building towards. It's really interesting to see the little bits and pieces be put into place in this one, and there are some plot lines. Like there was a plot point that we saw from one of our more like side characters' perspectives, but it was involving characters from the old series, and it was a really big plot point in terms of like what it means for the series, what it means for our characters, because it was told from the side character's point of view. It was kind of just like, it wasn't brushed over, but like we didn't stay there very long, and I was freaking out. Like, one of the things that's happening is tensions are rising with one of our older OG characters, and they're doing decisions that are a little sus, and we saw it in the first book, but like it's really, tensions are rising and it's stressing me out. I don't know how it's gonna resolve. I'm really scared. Yeah, I think that's everything. Like a 7.5 for this one, because the end pulled it down. Next up, I read The Project by Courtney Summers. I knew what this book was about before I went into it, but I didn't read the synopsis, so I didn't exactly know what was coming when I started, you know, the introduction and stuff. And I kind of don't want to tell you, because I thought it was interesting learning some of this stuff for myself. What I can say, we're following our main character, Lo. Her sister got involved in a project called the Unity Project, and this is a project that's had a lot of allegations thrown at them, I guess. People have accused them. They've accused them of being a cult, this Unity Project. And it's just kind of all about that. It's about Lo trying to figure out what happened to her sister, where she is, what's going on with her. Figure out what the hell's going on with this project, this creepy ass project that people would say is a cult. Really enjoyed this. I found it so difficult to put down. I just wanted to read it. I just wanted to figure out what the hell was going on, and I was changing my mind constantly. It like fooled me a couple times. It's so believable, and the characters all feel so real and so flawed. I listened to this one via audiobook, and the performances were great. It was a great audiobook. I will say there was a couple of things in the writing. There were a lot of repetitions really close to each other, so that did stick out a lot to me. Another thing that annoyed me is there were some plot points that characters would be really slow to figure out. There's a plot point that keeps coming up, and like the third time it happened, maybe I had figured out what was going on there, and it took our main character literally forever to even consider the possibility, which when characters don't figure things out that you figure out first isn't inherently a bad thing, because everyone figures things out in their own time. That's fine. But it annoys me when it's a character that's supposed to be quite competent. Competent? Wow. Competent. The word has lost all meaning. When it's a character that's supposed to be able to do these things, and this is, Lo's a journalist, she's trying to be a journalist, and she can't figure out this like little thing that I figured out immediately. That's when it bugs me. I started Defy the Night this month as well. I didn't actually finish it. That's something that's going on in that book as well. Oh, another little critique is I didn't fully understand something really important that happened in the end. It was kind of brushed over, and it was a big deal to the story. That's frustrating. This one was a little darker than Sadie. This one definitely has a more adult feeling, and I assume it's an adult book. Might not be, but there was like swearing and a little bit of sex, I think. And I kind of wanted it to be even darker and like more sinister at times and more disturbed, because I think that would have really like punched a punch. But those are the only kind of little issues I have. Other than that, it was so fascinating, and the relationships are so intense and complicated. It actually at times made me feel sick to my stomach, and that's rare. I love the cover. I was listening to the audiobook. I got it like the last day I was reading it, and I open it up and it says like, "You have been chosen. There is no flaw in you." And because I was like nearing the end of the book at that point, I was just like, that's so creepy, that's so creepy, that's so creepy. If you like cults, well, maybe cults, we don't, you know, they might not be a cult, who knows? I mean, I knows whether they're a cult or not. If you like messy family dynamics and messy relationships, I think you might like this one. I gave The Project a 9 out of 10. I can't give it anything lower because I enjoyed it too much. Next up, we have a book that I don't own yet, and it's actually like making me want to twitch a little bit. I really dislike having read books that I then don't own. Like, my collection is very important to me. That was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I read my first Christina Lauren book last year in holidays. I read that around Christmas time, and this is one that I've heard really good things about, and the synopsis intrigued me. It's about our lead character, whose name I forget. Her twin sister got married, and at the wedding everyone gets really sick, and so she can't go on her honeymoon, and our main character ends up going on the honeymoon with the groom's brother, who she's never really gotten on with. They kind of hate each other. Yeah. And it was really enjoyable. It was really cute. It was pretty funny as well. Definitely rom-com vibes. Really easy to read. I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook was really good. I read it, you know, really quickly in like a week while I was doing chores and stuff. That's become my new thing, to listen to audiobooks while I'm like doing chores or doing like getting ready for this. For instance, I was listening to an audiobook, another Christina Lauren one actually. I did it with the project as well, and I've just become like addicted to it. So that really helped my reading this month, and I hope that continues on. I really didn't want to stop listening to it. I just wanted to sit there and listen to it all the time. I will say there were a couple tropes that I predicted would come up, and then they did, and I didn't love them. The end at some point, it's not that it lost its way, it, like the tone or something changed, and I didn't like it as much, but it's really hard for me to put my finger on when that happened and why I didn't like it, like what I wanted it to do differently. So I can't really say much about it. I just know that I didn't love the ending. Other than that, it was a solid read. I mean, the writing it's a little clunky at times. It can be a little overwritten. It's nothing like stellar, but it's fun. It was enjoyable. I had a great time. Probably be 7 out of 10. Seven out of 10. That sounds good to me. Oh, and there was a hardcore family aspect that I really enjoyed. And then the next book is the like novella. I think it's a novella. I think it's too long to be a short story. I don't own it, so I can't say. This is another one that I've read and not owned. I read it on ebook version on Script. That is Sour Candy by Keelan Patrick Burke. This is horror, which I don't read a lot of, if any. I read Misery by Stephen King. I think that's the only thing I've read that could be counted as horror. Maybe The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. But I became obsessed with Paperback Dreams' channel over Christmas, and so I decided, hey, why not? This synopsis kind of sounds interesting, and it's really short. And the synopsis has so much potential. It's about a guy. He goes to the store and he sees this kind of like bedraggled, half-dead looking woman, and her child is just like literally screaming, like piercing screams. It's not like they're throwing a tantrum either. It sounds like he's just standing there and like he'll just scream every now and again. It's so creepy sounding. And then he ends up getting in a car accident with that woman, and stuff happens with him and the child. I think it's such an interesting premise, and children have the ability to be so creepy. One of my favourite books actually is The Turning of the Screw by Henry James. That might be horror, and that's about ghosts, and it's got children in it, and it's so creepy and you never know what's happening. Great recommendation if you haven't read it. Really short as well. It's one of my favourite like spooky books that I've ever read. Anyway, Sour Candy. The premise just took a turn. I don't know if it took a it wasn't what I wanted it to be. It felt quite underdeveloped. If it was maybe longer and we watched our main character struggle more, because we do skip time quite a lot, maybe that would have helped. The problem is just it ended up not being what I wanted it to be. Just very strange, and it just wasn't that scary either, or creepy, or just like the tone. It was just very strange. I mean, I enjoyed the beginning. It was an okay time. I didn't hate reading it or anything. I didn't think it was the worst thing ever. The writing, it did kind of bounce between being underdeveloped and then also being overwritten, which was strange, but for the most part it was pretty solid. I'm glad I read it. It was interesting and different, and I kind of had fun with how weird it ended up being. But yeah, like a 4 out of 10, I think. See, look at me using the full scale. And then next up we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is my first V.E. Schwab book, but there's a lot of books that she's written that I want to read, and I've watched her in interviews a lot, and I think she's really cool and interesting. I'm really glad to have finally at least read one of her books. And this is a gorgeous book as well. It's kind of like glittery and shimmery. The paper of it you can't see on camera, I don't think. Like when I saw pictures of the cover, I was like, yeah, it's fine, but like in person, I don't know. I really like the cover. It's about a woman who has been cursed so that people forget her. That's all I knew going into it, and I think that's all you need to know. You find this out pretty early on. This one also has really interesting relationships, probably even more so than the project. Like, I was able to sit and think about them afterwards for so long. There's romance and there's conflict within the romance, and that sounds really obscure. I don't know how to describe it to you, but it's really, really interesting to sit and think about. And our main character is really interesting because of their curse. It also, the story takes place throughout a really long stretch of time, so we definitely have historical fiction elements in here. I really loved that, and the way the past would connect to her future were really big themes about like art and creativity and why we make stories and what stories mean to us, those kinds of themes, which I always really love, and how important ideas are. It's just really interesting, all of the themes and all the things it tackled and looked at, and it suited the story so well. The characters all felt very real and interesting, and I rooted for them very hard. It's written beautifully. The writing in here is absolutely gorgeous. Very character driven as well. It's very kind of slow burn, character driven. A little bit of mystery elements in there. Again, I kind of predicted a lot of like what was going to happen before it happened. It's definitely a slow burn of a story. I don't mind that though, I like that. The only thing I think I could really critique on is pacing wise, kind of changed in the middle. Like, we got another character's backstory and it just kind of abandoned those like flashbacks from our main character for a while. It was like this one random chunk and then it went back to normal. I kind of wish it was a little bit more spliced up. Kind of come to peace with it. I don't know if there's another way it could be done. I was a mess by the time I finished this. It was really good. It was just really, really good. I really enjoyed it. It was really clever. And my camera died. The only other thing I could say about it is it didn't reach out and touch my soul in the way I wanted it to. And also, you can't control how you react in that way if you react so intimately to it. It's frustrating because I wanted it to. I felt like it should have. Don't know if it's a 9 or a 10 out of 10. It's clever and good enough that I think it should be a 10 out of 10. I don't know if I like it enough though. I don't know if I'm like absolutely head over heels in love with it. I don't know if I just need to sit with the story a bit longer. I feel like it deserves a 10 out of 10, so I'm gonna give it one now, but it might bump down to like a 9 or a 9.5 over time. I don't know. Oh. And then the last book that I finished this month was the other non-fiction book I read. I'm hoping to read more non-fiction this year. 3 Women by Lisa Taddeo. 3 Women is a record of unmet needs, unspoken thoughts, disappointments, hopes, and unrelenting obsessions. It's about real life women, and desire is really important. They all are kind of in taboo relationships, and it's about the way it affects them. It's about their desire. Also a little bit about the way people react to them because of their circumstances. And it's, you know, from a feminist perspective, it's really interesting to watch the way these women internalize things and the way people judge these women. I just found it fascinating. It's really beautifully written. The audiobook, I listened to the audiobook for this one, and there's different narrators for each of the women, and they're all great. Really easy to listen to. I didn't want this one to end. I just wanted to stay with them. And I rooted and I felt so much for each of these women. It was so full of heart and emotion. Very thought-provoking. Very fascinating to read. While reading it, one of the women, Maggie, we spend a little bit more time with her than we do the other two, I think. And not that it frustrated me, I just wanted them all to be held with the same amount of kind of time. The thing with Maggie's case though, she's the only one that doesn't have like a fake name, I guess, because hers is about a real case that happened, and that was really fascinating to get to hear her side of the story and then know like about the case. Might make sense as to why it was treated that way. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I wanted there to be more of this, but like legitimately it does feel like we spend a small amount of time with these people, and because we're just kind of dipping into their lives, there's not really a resolution on a lot of the stories. I mean, Maggie's the one that I think is the closest to a resolution, maybe also Sloane. Lena's, we just kind of leave and it's just like, what happened? I need to know what happened. But maybe Lena was still kind of going through it when the book was being written, and so we couldn't know what happened. Fascinating, very well written, very thought-provoking. Really just enjoyable as well to read. 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. I can't give it anything lower. And those are all the books that I read in January. Please let me know down below what your favorite book you read in January was, how many books you read in January. I'd love to chat about it. If you could give this video a thumbs up, that would really help out my channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!